Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Hey everybody!
Hey,
we're back!
How about
another
that?
another week of our beautiful faces.
Yep.
So yeah, I hope if you're listening
for those
to
of
this,
you listening to it the old-fashioned way,
which thank you
just
so
our
much
voices.
for doing that. Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. And I gotta admit, there was a couple times last week that we were doing this, and I made visual references, like hey, this, I was doing stuff that I realized, oh yeah,
Right.
no, we're still by and large an audio medium. We just now incorporated the video element of it, and I need to remember that.
and everybody gets their choice of which one they want to choose.
Right.
And you're not really, other than the occasional visual reference going forward, you're not missing much either way.
No, we're not going to be like, hey, take a look at this picture. and we're not planning on introducing any video clips into this.
There will be no graphs, no charts, or any of the like. So don't worry about that. We promise. I can absolutely 100% promise that.
All right. So, welcome. We are so happy that you're joining us for another week. And this week is a new one for us. We are trying. We're going to do something new. We will be for the first time. We will have guests. We have guests this week on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan.
Can you believe it?
I know. As we will be promoting, it hasn't. I don't believe it's been released yet. Our interview with our friend Dayna from. She's with the Arts Partnership in Fargo, North Dakota, promoting arts in the Fargo-Moorhead, in the great northwest north of Minnesota and North Dakota. And she had Ryan and I on to talk about podcasting and to relive some of our stories and our history, our long history together, the three of us, and even longer for the two of you. And a
little bit longer.
But and so to return, and frankly, I mean, we did it and said, okay, well, we did your podcast, you're coming on ours.
Yeah.
And Dayna was great, and Dayna actually had the wonderful idea and of bringing her fantastic husband on, Dr.
Fellow
Mazz.
movie lover.
And fellow movie lover, they have a podcast. Well, we'll bring them in here in a minute, but they have a podcast,
and we've talked about their podcast on the show before. We gave a little shout out to them because they're really neat people. Extraordinary is a really cool name for their podcast.
Yeah, and it just
suits them.
Yeah, and a really, really fantastic story that they have. So let's bring them in and. Did I just hang up on? No. Oh boy, I just had a nervous. I thought I hung up on you. I'm like,
come in and then go away. We thought it too.
Yeah. Oh boy. So hi, welcome to the Movie Show.
Thank you.
Introduce yourselves real quick.
I'm Dayna Delval, longtime friend of Joel and Ryan's.
I'm Mazz. I've known Joel for years. Obviously, I'm a long-time friend of my wife, Dayna. And Ryan and I just met.
For the first time.
Love each other like brothers.
But we were aware of each other, yes. I was certainly aware of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's neat.
But it's nice to meet everyone in one week.
Yeah, it's great that you guys to have you guys on. We're so happy that you're here.
Well, I feel a little bit like I forced your hand. So thanks for graciously
Not at all. We are thrilled that you're our first guest ever because we've never had guests before and we don't know what we're doing. And so it's it's really neat to have a little, to have you on our show when we were just on yours, and frankly, just that it's you guys and that you kind of know what this is like.
Absolutely.
Getting in front of people and talking
So there's no pressure.
off the cuff about things you're hoping others other than yourself will find interesting or important.
You have 2 hoots about? We give at least 3
the
hoots
hope.
about your show.
That is the hope.
Well, before we jump into some of the specific movies that we've been talking about, we've exchanged in offline conversations. Talk to us a little bit about your experience with movies and what role movies might play a little bit in each of your lives. Mazz, as our listeners may hear, that you are not a native of Fargo or Moorhead.
No, I'm a plant in Fargo. I've been here 19 years. I moved here in January of 2001. You would have thought I'd lost some of the accent there somehow.
Oh, you have?
Oh, I have I? You betcha.
Where originally you're from?
So my parents are Irish, but I was born and grew up in Windsor in England. Stone's throw from where the Queen lives. Went to college in Yorkshire, in the great north of England. Then I moved to Norwich. Then I spent 2 years living in Glasgow in Scotland, and then I moved here.
Nice. Was it work? Was it work that brought you here?
Yep, it was.
Hold, please.
Yeah.
It was work, but he actually came because of a movie.
I did come because of a movie.
I mean, Mazz Mary is going to be your best guest ever.
I've been telling this story for 19 years, and I think I've got it down to less than 2 minutes. So
go for it.
When my father was alive, we used to love watching war movies and westerns, and one of my favorites was She Wore a Yellow Ribbon.
Yeah,
and it's famous because John Wayne says to Joanne Drew, "Never apologize to a man; it's a sign of weakness." In one part of the film, when he says that to her, they're standing behind a placard that says, "Welcome to Fargo, Dakota Territory." And the film was made in South Dakota. So when I was doing my PhD, a guy from NDSU came to do a sabbatical at NDSU, and we became really good friends. So we met up a few years later, and he said to me when I was still in Glasgow, "What are you doing next? Your job's finishing in Glasgow." I said, "Well, I've got a job opportunity in Christchurch, New Zealand." And he said, I want you to come to NDSU. I said, "Well, all right, I get it's in North Dakota, but where is it?" And when he said Fargo, I remembered She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and I said, "Right, I'll come." And my dad had died a year before, so it was kind of like, I'll do it as a homage to my dad. And I came here 8 months into my time at NDSU. I met Dayna. Then I started working at MN, where all three of you graduate from. I've been there 15 years now.
Yeah,
wow.
now you're a regular staple of the Red River Valley.
So the cross-up between going to Christchurch, New Zealand and Fargo, North Dakota came down to a John Wayne movie.
Wow.
That's spectacular. That's spectacular. And Dayna, you are a Moorhead native or Fargo native.
Moorhead. I graduated from high school, moved here when I was 15. So, I mean, from the area.
That's right. Yeah. Where were you before 15? Before that?
I lived in Wapaton from 16
That's right.
And then I lived in a really tiny town before that called Waimea.
Yeah.
Wow.
So always in the Red River Valley.
I thought Wapaton was a really teeny tiny town.
Yeah.
You think Fargo's a tiny town.
Little tiny for me, but it's a happening town.
It's an okay place.
It has its pluses.
So you talk, so obviously movies clearly were a pretty decent part of culturally you growing up there, Dr. Mazz.
Yeah, I just loved watching them. My dad and I used to watch them all the time. When they invented the VCR machine, and we got one in 1985. And then when more and more videos where VCR tapes of films. A load of your viewers may have to Google most
We've done whole episodes on the evolution of home video.
Yeah, our listeners are well versed on that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
it's
Even if they didn't know what that was coming into this, by now unfortunately they've been exposed to all versions of it. That's neat though. There was a time when VHS tapes come out where you weren't at the mercy of what was being broadcast on the tube. Your pop could say, "Oh, you could choose. Hey, I want to watch this, or I'm going to show you that, or you're going to see this." It did change things. That first time that films were a la carte to all of us, to humanity, truly, without having to have a projector or a screening room in your mansion. Anyone could pick out anything they had on the shelf and watch it. It was cool. It was not a small thing in the history of film, I don't think.
No, we got a VCR the year my brother was born, so 1982. And we had a membership, a gas station in Wahpeton had a little video section, had like 10 VHSs, and you paid, I don't know, who knows how much a month. Right. And you could just go back and get those 10 movies over and over and over again, and they just kept adding to it, and it was unbelievable.
Yeah, our video store, Joel and I both went to the same one in our childhoods in a town called Osseo, Minnesota. Yeah. And it had more than 10, but we still just rented the same 6 videos basically over and over and over again.
It was, give me that copy of First Blood again, please.
I wanted to watch the Frisco Kid. That was my
Frisco
favorite.
Kid. That was another big
multiple rental.
Yeah.
The Western.
The local high street where I grew up had its own video store. So, we had actually, even from the mid 80s, we had a lot of videos to. We had a Betamax section and then the VCR section.
Right.
And one kept getting significantly larger as the time going on, and the other one went shrunk down. Well, that's awesome. All right, so when we were setting this up, we sent a little message out saying, "Hey, were there any particular movies that especially you, Mazz, that mean anything to you that would be fun to talk about?" You had expressed early on a desire to sort of talk about some B-level movies, and so then when we got your list of about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movies here, so I sent them on to Ryan, and both of us just kind of went, okay, all right, we're gonna.
Those aren't B movies. Those are stone cold classics. I don't know what he thinks a B movie is.
I thought I'd move away from the B movies because, Dayna's dad for Christmas, he and his wife got me 100 B movies box set, and I tried to get Quinn to watch them, and
that was a no-go.
It was a no-go.
Yeah.
I look like an active and willing participant.
So I think when Dayna said 3 to 5 movies, I thought, you know what, let's just talk about things that there might be a chance it's one of you two have actually seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before we got your list, Ryan and I were messaging back and forth, and we're like, well, what about you? Do you have like B movies or anything and I'm throwing out like, I don't know, Plan 9 from Outer Space, maybe. I said
movies.
Yeah, I said
of absolute garbage, but the kind that have survived for one reason or another, whose legends have survived and are enjoyable to watch for being bad.
Yeah, Night of the Lepus, one of my favorite all-time bad movies. It's about killer bunnies.
Attack of the Giant Killer Bunnies.
Yeah, with DeForest Kelley from Star Trek.
Of Star Trek fame.
And so then when we got this
list,
what
it says on the box, featuring DeForest Kelley of Star Trek fame.
Yeah.
that phrase of whatever fame became a thing that Joel and Michael and I used to just say about everybody for years afterwards because of the box of Night of the Lepus.
And then I would say And then I would say, if I'm stuck, I'm just gonna bring up Escape to Victory, and we're gonna.
We can always do that. If
Yeah, we're gonna.
Anyway, you want.
But the first movie on your list is Them, which is a giant ant movie.
Yes.
Certainly, it could be considered a B movie. It's old, it's silly, it's about giant ants caused by nuclear testing.
Yes.
But even it is like the kind of the best giant ant movie of all time. It's not, it's really, really well done for the kind of the tools they had to use at the time. Stop motion and miniatures and stuff.
And 6 foot models of ants.
Yeah.
But
so
I bought this film recently.
That was on both of your lists, so we're going to start with that.
Yeah.
You can justify why that's an all-time classic.
I love it. Oh dear, I might nerd myself out now. Actually.
Please, if you're going to do it, you're in a safe space. Literally, this is our listeners were all like, hee, go, Beta. You already mentioned Beta. Yay. That's who we are.
You're in the club now, officially.
Yeah, well, there's a scene where they work out that to disorientate the ants, they have to shoot off the antennas with their machine guns. And that is actually how you disorientate an ant in real life. So they actually have the biology.
See, it's well thought out film. There's no question about it.
Ant, you knock off its antennas.
My favorite anecdote about them is that Walt Disney really, really loved it. To him, that was movie magic at its finest. He would never make a movie like that, but he really dug it. And one of the soldiers, and it's not one of the main characters, but one of the heroic soldiers in it was cast as Davy Crockett in the 2 Walt Disney Davy Crockett movies, based on the strength of his performance in them.
You know, Brooks in Shawshank Redemption.
He wasn't Davy Crockett.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, Fess Parker.
That's right.
Yeah. In fact, Walt Disney watched them because he was told, you're going to want to cast James Arness as Davy Crockett. And then, but when he watched it, he was
That's
so
hard
taken.
to imagine.
Yeah, and he was so like, no, this Fess Parker guy, I love that. And then I was reading on that same thing. John Wayne saw them and liked James Arness so much that he said, I think this guy might be good for this Gunsmoke show that's being developed. And so that's how James Arness got his audition for Gunsmoke based on John Wayne's recommendation.
Everybody ended up where they belonged.
It all comes back to Marion.
Well,
John Wayne.
One of the reasons I gave you the list of this film is I saw it recently because I just bought a copy of it because I've been watching films since the lockdown, and that film is, what do they call them? Eggs? Is it an egg? Just an egg? An Easter egg?
Yeah.
So that film appears in huge numbers of movies that I watch. For example, here's an example: Whiteout with Kate Beckinsale.
Mm-hmm.
When just after she loses her 2 fingers and she goes in and has a hissy fit in her office, she knocks a DVD off her desk, and it's them.
It's them. Yep, I remember that well. Them. It does show up in everything on TVs in the background, and it's a much used.
Well, it's the perfect title.
Yeah.
It's and it's
them exclamation point.
Yeah, them exclamation point with a giant ant head. It's like everything that a cheesy B movie from the 50s, like it ticks all the boxes, but it's actually not that. I mean, it's like we've said, it's really well thought out. Like you
don't end up with a fun, cheesy movie when you set out to just goof around making it. You have to take whatever it is you're doing seriously, and they totally do in that, and that's a big part of why it's endured.
Mm-hmm. And I believe it is loosely based on a Jane Austen novel.
It is.
So we all have something to love.
Actually, Joe, you're absolutely correct. But before there was Pride and Prejudice and zombies, there was Pride and Prejudice.
Sense and Sensibility. Yeah, Sense and Sensibility and them.
And
ants during the picnic.
Ants.
Why do you think Colin Firth had to jump into that lake? Covered in ants.
Covered in ants. And he knew that the nuclear holocaust was coming. I do mention that. We did ask, dear listener, we did ask Dayna what her movies, we're not just going to be like, hey, us three guys are going to nerd out and Dana's just going to sit there and go, hey, thanks, guys.
We'll get to Dayna. There's at least one other person, Dayna, on the show right now who loves costume dramas.
Excellent. And I told you, I'm just here to laugh at the three of you. It's all good.
I love costume dramas, and I'm here to tell you.
You're coming on our Jane Austen adaptation countdown for sure.
Great.
Yeah, you'll be back for the.
That's
Jane
kind of
Austen
its own
episode.
show, but you'll be back for that because we'll need you. Because watch, Joel, which adaptation of Persuasion is your favorite?
It's the one with the it's Persuasion ! It has the ants in it.
That's a really good one.
I'll need you for that show. Is what I'm saying.
I'll be there. I'm there
No,
for you.
I mean, I love me some Jane Austen too, but I don't know.
But you wouldn't. You can't pick a Persuasion. You're not really.
If you can't say Sally Hawkins right off the tip of your tongue, you don't count.
Actually,
sure,
the other one slightly, but the point is you have to have a favorite.
One too. I think the other one's really beautiful.
Fight.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, the next one up, When Worlds Collide is a movie that I do not know. Big surprise to our listeners, and that one, but I love the idea of it. I kind of can't believe I haven't seen this.
You know what? It's what I think. I can't be sure on this, but how that film starts is kind of, I think, the idea of how they started Deep Impact.
Sure.
A scientist found, he was racing to get the information that someone had died. But that happens in When Worlds Collide. They find out that this big planet is going to collide with the Earth, but it's dragging another planet with it. So the plan is to get as many people as possible onto the moon of this rogue planet so they can survive.
It sounds kind of, it sounds like a badass film, actually. Obviously whoever wrote this plot description that I read for it online did a tremendous job of selling this film. It's long. It's many.
It's a synopsis.
It's a synopsis. Yeah.
Because I love, me, I love a 2-sentence.
Yeah. The elevator pitch. Yeah. I mean, the elevator pitch would be like, well, what was the poster? It was, planets destroy Earth when worlds collide.
That's more of a tagline.
That's a tagline.
But not bad. Not bad marketing. Let's see what the marketing boys came up with for What Worlds Collide.
Now, is that a movie you've seen recently, or is that one that you had
seen a bunch of times? I bet.
Little Dr. Mary got to watch that.
I haven't seen it in a while. I have seen it a bunch of times. I used to watch. It used to be on a lot on BBC Two, Saturday night, science fiction night, Friday night on BBC Two, 11 o'clock at night. They used to throw these science fiction movies on, and that one was on a lot.
Yep, that one, and you had This Island Earth too,
that was a good one as well.
Which I know a little better than When Worlds Collide, but they're similar kind of stories in a way, a little different. The physics and the where we're going to do what is slightly different, but the basic problems are kind of the same, which is fun.
Yeah, and the idea of these building these arcs to try to transport people. We've seen that. We've
seen all that stuff in some big blockbusters fairly recently. Even
I was just saying that 2012 movie where they're the Mayan
catastrophe.
Yeah, it was
that film. Honestly, I love 2012.
2012, I'll say this about it because I don't think it's very good, but 2012 plays all the necessary lip service that you need to do. When you watch it, the film, even though it's intent on destroying the world, has it demonstrates a value for human life that disaster movies in its wake have struggled to do. It only does it in the most vacuous ways, but it still does it, which to me is important.
Well, there's a breakdown of order when Worlds Collide. There's a breakdown in order in 2012, but that speech, what's his name? I can never pronounce his name.
Oh,
Chiwetel Ejiofor.
He gives that speech about if we're going to start the human race again, we have to do it with an act of greatness. And
Mazz is going to start to weep any moment.
That's a great moralistic thing to put in a big budget,
in a big, terrible, bad
disaster
movie.
Right. It really does very deliberately check all the boxes, and films have gotten lazy about that lately.
They get Woody Harrelson to play a really cool weirdo.
I'm breaking the use empathy to talk about films rule, so I'll try to be quiet.
Okay, well, we should move on to the next one anyway.
Well, I mean, I will say I'm reading a little tidbit here. We talked about Deep Impact. Apparently, the whole thing Deep Impact started as a remake of When Worlds Collide, combined with the Arthur C. Clarke novel The Hammer of God.
Huh? That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's what it originally. What Deep Impact started at, and then it became.
Can I say my favorite moment in Deep Impact before we move on?
Always.
It's the fact that the reporter thinks she's chasing somebody having an affair story and actually trips into the biggest thing of all time and never really knows until, she kind of figures it out, or the gist of it before it's announced, but has no idea why these people are kidnapping her and scowling at her. Yeah. She thinks she just found out that somebody's been hiding an affair. I find that whole thing, and Taya Leone in particular plays that with such truthfulness that I adore those moments.
Yep.
And what does James Cromwell says? I know you're a reporter, but you used to be a person. Because he's talking about something that's off the hook, and she's like, geez, the arrogance of this guy. He goes and he's got a mistress somewhere, and he's talking to me like it's the end of the world. And of course it is the end of the world. It's awesome.
Nice.
It's clever. Nothing clever as that in Armageddon. I'll say that.
But they did have
Cracker Savannah is clever in Armageddon.
Yeah.
Which is?
The Animal Cracker Savannah.
It does have a couple of.
Yeah,
Armageddon is one of those films you sort of bashfully admit you enjoy watching, not because it's good, but because it figures out how to kind of hit you all those emotional places. It just like smacks you over the head. It's whack-a-mole, but it's entertaining.
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen Deep Impact once a year since it came out. I've seen Armageddon maybe twice.
I think I've only seen Armageddon once, a billion years
ago.
But
I watch movies every day.
Well, because you're
I'm a little different. Yeah.
Like exercise.
I'm just saying it's different. I have a different sample size.
That's true.
I have them both over here on the wall, so I'm not taking the I hate Armageddon high horse or anything. I'm just saying that one's comparatively, there's little emotional in there for me. It certainly is big, bold, and entertaining, though. You got to give it that.
Yeah.
Of the two, it's the more spectacular, definitely.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, it's got a faster pace to it.
Yeah, and just everything's bigger. The disaster, explosions, But those families, something. Deep Impact's a character story. It's made by people who make ensemble television. The director of ER made that. Makes a difference to me.
All right. So next up on Mazz's list of wonder is a little movie called Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane.
The Ninth Configuration.
The Ninth Configuration, also known as Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane.
Yeah, that is actually my favorite movie.
Is it really?
Really?
It is.
It amongst the people who love the Ninth Configuration, it's also over here on the shelf. It is truly, utterly beloved. But it's a unique. It's a unique. I mean, I'm on film forums and I discuss things with people on the internet. And when Ninth Configuration came out in high definition for the first time, people, not a lot of people, but the people who have heard of it and then have seen it and liked it, because a lot of people see it and feel totally alienated by it. It's a very odd film. We just were ecstatic that they were going to be able to have this sort of in its best format, because it is a kind of beautiful throwback movie. It came out in 1980. It takes place sometime in the early 70s.
Yeah,
but
like 60s.
Like a 60s movie to me, because it has this hippie sort of ethos. and I'm ruining this. We should be letting Mazz introduce Ninth Configuration, but
No,
I'm
it's
excited because I got a lot to say about it. It's such an odd and unique film. But what is it that? Why is it your favorite film of all time? What is it in it that connects with you? I should say.
I think it's the, everyone in it is a little broken. They're trying to work out why these people are broken.
Right. Ninth Configuration's the story of a post-Vietnam asylum for soldiers suffering from different conditions in a castle somewhere in Europe where I can't remember.
So one of them who thinks he's Superman was a B-52 pilot in Vietnam, and he just snapped because he realized what the bombs he was dropping were doing, and he thought he was Superman. There's a guy a guy that was awarded the Medal of Honor, who's rewriting Shakespeare's plays for dogs. And there's that fantastic scene when he's arguing about Hamlet, about, is he crazy or isn't he? And he does this whole scene about, is he crazy? Is he just teetering? Is he on the brink? He's hanging on by a thread, but what he's doing, he's acting crazy to stop himself going crazy. And the first time I saw this part, I was on the edge of my seat going, oh, this is brilliant. And then when Kane says, I think you might be right, and then just to diffuse it, he grabs hold of the dog and says, see, from now on, we play it my way. And he walks off the dog.
It's full of memorable, off-the-wall moments like that.
I think in it as well.
Joel, you've got the cast in front of you, don't you?
Yeah, I do here. Yeah,
read some of the names. It's really stocked with brilliant actors from that period.
Yeah, Stacy Keach, is the anchor of the film, but it's got Scott Wilson,
very much against type. Stacy Keach, it's one of his best roles.
Scott Wilson, Jason Miller, Ed Flanders, Neville Brand, George DeCenzo, Moses Gunn, Robert Loggia.
I just top to bottom.
Well, William Peter Blatty's in it.
Yeah.
Right. He makes an appearance in it.
It won.
Stealing his stethoscope.
Yeah, and and this it won the Golden Globe for best screenplay.
Yeah.
It's a movie that the folks from the Globe would appreciate in a way Hollywood probably wouldn't.
Yeah, it was nominated for 3 Golden Globes, including best film,
and no Oscars.
Yeah, but no Oscars. It's Dayna, have you seen this movie? Mazz?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm the only one here who doesn't know about it. I mean,
I actively disliked it.
It's a legit response to it, to be fair.
Here's what I can say. When I think about it, first of all, it's hard for me to know if I remember this or if I've just heard Mazz tell his shtick about the Ninth Configuration so many times. But what I do know I remember is the scene in the bar with the guy and the pool cue and the crazy Richard Harris from Camelot blue eyeshadow. And I just remember thinking, enough now. And that happens like only halfway through the film.
That's right. It's also, sort of the big centerpiece of it, but it is odd. Even that gang is so neither 74 nor 80. It's like a 1961 hooligan gang.
It's like
it's so weirdly out of place in the world of the story.
Development. I mean, it's just the most bizarre group. And also, I just felt like Stacy Keach was either almost dead or furious. He was either a 1 or a 14. There's no 2 to 13 in there.
But I've always thought his 13 was an act for the people around him to some degree.
It's possible. It's possible.
I mean, I actually use this film. Every class I teach, they have an extra credit that has nothing to do with my class. The last day of class, they can, for extra credit, they can get themselves a copy of the Ninth Configuration. You can actually get it free on YouTube. And they can watch it and write me a 2-page essay on what they thought of the movie. And if I like it, I'll give them up to 20 bonus points.
There you go.
So people have been watching this film for 15 years. In fact, one of Quinn's really close friends who took 2 of my non-major classes, he watched it and he said to me, all right, it's an interesting film. In the bar fight, when he takes off his mirrored sunglasses, why is he wearing eyeliner? And I just looked at Matt and I said, Matt, This film was made in the 70s. That's all you need to know.
That's great.
Matt and I have the same questions.
To anyone who has now had their interest piqued in Ninth Configuration, before we move on, I'll give you a little movie show with Joel and Ryan warning about it. You've got one from Dayna. I don't disagree with her. I admire the movie a lot. I find it tough to enjoy too, not because it isn't what it is. You really need to think about watching it while it's not a puzzle to be decoded. It really is. There's a lot. William Peter Blatty, who's most famous for writing The Exorcist, fills it up with this loony, zany, it's a mad world sort of humor and allegory and metaphor. And it's so, while we always suggest, you don't think too much hard about that stuff while you're watching a movie, I think that's a mistake. Know that that's what it is. And that's going to have to appeal to you, because it does not in any way present a realistic depiction of the actual mental problems that Vietnam soldiers came out of the war with. Absolutely. It's very much a MASH like post-World War II sort of irreverent tale. And as long as you know that, you're less likely to feel kind of boxed in the corner by it, in my opinion. So
that answers
a bit
the
of a
question.
Spoiler, but a little bit of a word.
Well, that answers the question that I was going to have, that I had for it. Someone who hasn't seen it, I was going to say, is it like a PTSD film ahead of its time? But this is
very much behind its time. Which is the big knock on it, if there is one.
Sure.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It is kind of like MASH-esque.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is it's a lot. I mean, I like it much better than MASH, which I've never really liked. But it's that same counterculture sort of laugh it off, and isn't the world an insane place, and aren't the insane truly sane? That's the sort of idea behind it. And that's neat that you can go a long way with that and be very entertained by it and even get something out of it. But it was very unfashionable movie. The fact that Europeans critics really, really loved it, and that the American critics didn't at all, just sort of shows you that it's working on a different level. It's a love it or hate it kind of movie. There's nothing wrong with that. Feeling strongly one way or another is exciting. That's the whole point. So.
And it's important to should not be confused with Jane Austen's The Ninth Configuration.
Ninth Configuration, that's a whole different thing.
That's a very quiet little period romance, more to the point.
Yeah.
And the commentary on socioeconomic politics.
Is there a single woman outside the bar scene in Ninth Configuration?
No, well,
it's very much one of those old school. It's all guys.
It's
sort of
a
stories.
Sausage fest of a cast list here. Yeah,
I think with Cupshaw, because he wouldn't go to the moon because he said it was naughty and impolite. Really, he was afraid that if God didn't exist, he didn't want to die alone. I think in Jane Austen's version of this film, she refused to take a turn about the room in case God didn't exist. By the bookshelf.
Mazz lives to ask me if we should take a turn
about the room.
I think if we take a turn about the room.
Yeah.
You can't say he's not paying attention.
Yeah. Next up. Next up is a movie with another like Murderer's Row cast here, and this is In Harm's Way, the '65 movie.
Otto Preminger.
Yeah, Otto
directs. One of, if not John Wayne's best film, probably. In terms of quality films, there's 4 or 5 to choose from. This is on that list, and it would be pretty high up the list for a lot of folks.
Well, what this film was, after this film, John Wayne had part of his lung removed. And the next film he made after this was The Green Berets. So you can see how he kind of was going down a bit.
Yeah,
I just love this film. It's a 3-hour movie. They filmed it in black and white to make it. I think it helped because it's a World War II movie, but it's got everything in it. It's got. I mean, he's old. He was when he was younger. He was in war movies with Patricia Neal. Mm-hmm. So they made this film like 20 years later, and it works as they're 50-somethings. And you can actually believe it that they start a romance during the Second World War, and it kind of makes sense. His best friend is damaged, and what he does during this film, and then he tries to redeem himself by an act of heroism. He has the developing of a relationship with his son, who's now in the Navy, that he hasn't seen since he was 3.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
so
that.
I think it's just that it's a war film, and unlike most war films made today, it's got a story.
Yeah,
it
really does, a personal story.
Yeah.
And you have a personal stake as an audience member in it. Otto doesn't make unmeaningful films. He that's what he's interested in, and yet there's enough World War II claptrap in it, which is always for me anyway. I really like World War II movies. I like the more European ones where they're sneaking around behind enemy lines and there's just like 5 or 6 people to keep track of. This is sort of a massive. It's war in the Pacific, basically, right?
Yeah,
in harm's way. It's the Pacific War primarily. Because he's reprimanded after some stuff that happens at Pearl Harbor, and the whole thing's a story of personal redemption. And
that's how he gets promoted. He puts in charge, and then he just does everything right.
Yeah. Listen to this cast again: John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, Patricia Neal, Burgess Meredith is even
Paula
in
Prentice
it.
is in it too, right?
Paula Prentice, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
I'm a big fan of her. She's good. Very underrated.
Dana Andrews, Stanley Holloway, Slim Pickens is George Kennedy, Larry Hagman.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Right at the start, Larry Hagman's in it.
Yep, Henry Fonda is in it. So yeah,
goodness, you buried the lead, Henry Fonda. He must not have a very big role in it.
No, he's the character is based on Admiral Nimitz. Yeah, he's Sink Pack 2. I'm on just another big.
It's a Paramount movie,
epic,
and it has been treated it's a big, like Mazz said, it's a big 3-hour or 2:45-ish war epic. It's black and white, but it's a big widescreen entertainment. And Paramount, since they got bought by the Viacom amusement park people, just don't take care of their older films. They don't care about them. And that's one where to watch it is to see it in some sort of compromised way. Which is why I haven't seen it other than bits and pieces of it through the years. But otherwise, that would be on my list. I wouldn't miss it. Otto and World War II. Although, be careful. Just shout out to everybody. This is good advice for everybody. If you remember one thing from this show that I said, remember, be very careful about buying John Wayne film on Amazon if you're not a super big John Wayne fan.
Why?
Because Amazon will only try to sell you John Wayne films for the next 30 years.
Oh.
You will be target marketed every single film he ever made. He made like 120 movies.
Yeah,
if you're like me and you only like a half dozen or so of them, buy your John Wayne films on eBay. Do not buy them on Amazon. That's just a tip. I bought the Cowboys on Amazon, and I was never able to convince Amazon that
you've never been the same since.
That I didn't love John Wayne. John Wayne it's every film. Oh my God, we found one. We found a John Wayne fan. I don't have a problem with John, but the types of movies, Green Beret is a good example that he made. Most of them don't do a lot for me. John Ford, Otto Preminger, Mark Rydell. There are people he's worked with and done films with that are extraordinary because he was the biggest movie star in the world when he was a star. So it's not like he accidentally tripped into bad movies. He agreed to do them, but to be fair, he's just not asked to do a lot like he is in Harm's Way. He was capable of it. He just didn't need to very often, and so the films often don't quite rise to that. So, but I'm glad you brought this one up because we wouldn't have, because neither of us have seen it.
Yeah. Let's move.
A quick 3.5-hour drive to the Del Val Mary incredible cinematic basement 30-inch TV or whatever we have. So you're welcome anytime.
Nice. It has a nice DVD that came out like 22 years ago, but it needs to. That's a big, important film. It needs to be restored and treated properly. And as soon as it is, I will hop on board. I'd like to see that very much.
Kind of surprised with a cast like that and a World War II film that it hasn't.
Well, and a John Wayne film.
Yeah, John Wayne film. Yeah, that it hasn't been.
It's not because of any of that. It's because it's Paramount.
Yeah,
if it was an MGM film or a Warner film, it'd been out by now. You'd be able to go to whatever streaming service and watch it. Paramount's bankrupt. They don't produce movies anymore. They just distribute them, and they only care about the new ones. They don't do any sort of. They're just It's not. I hate to even say it's Paramount because it's not Paramount's fault. It's Viacom. They're garbage.
Viacom.
Viacom.
They're the worst.
I'm going to be disappointed if before we get off this Zoom call, a drone knock does not come to your door, Ryan Newton, with some super obscure early John Wayne film because Amazon has figured out how to just watch everything that happens on the computer. And so stuff's coming from like Sheboygan, Wisconsin as we speak.
Yeah,
we'll see. Hopefully that won't happen until after we post the show. If it happens now, I'll be really concerned. In real time. They're in on our Zoom meetings now.
Yeah, that's what it is. They're tracking the Zoom meeting. Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past them.
All right. Let's move on to the main event. I consider this the main event of our discussion. Everything has just been the appetizer, the aperitif. Zardoz.
Dun, dun, dun.
Mazz marries.
Zardoz.
This is my guilty pleasure movie.
Yeah. Well, it's a great. I mean, it's a fun film. It's a bonkers film.
Is it, Joel? Are you sure it's fun?
Well,
is that what you want our viewers to think coming out of the show?
Yes, I do. Fun, everybody. Get a thing of popcorn, sit down, pop in some
your favorite
Zardoz.
colored man diaper.
Yeah, get a man diaper and a ponytail. Put on a
weird sex scenes.
Think about it, though. What year was Zardoz set in?
2005.
Well, I happen to know it's set in the year 2293.
Oh, 2293. No,
so we
that's
got a
smart.
little bit
Back in the 70s, they didn't set things too far off in the future, and we've sort of passed a lot of those films.
I know.
In reality
Back
now.
to the Future, another fun film. That's
Right,
legitimately
Blade
fun.
Runner was set in 2019.
There we go.
It was. Very famously.
I like this film. I just like the idea of it when, he gets into the big floating head and, they're worshipping Zardoz, and then he gets taught to read, and he's just all the way through this film, you see the snippets of him and Arthur Dent falling out of the head. And then it builds up to the fact that he's holding a book with his two thumbs over the title of Wizard of Oz, and it's Zardoz.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert for Zardoz, everybody.
Sorry about that. But
I don't know. That's a fun. That's the funnest moment probably in the whole thing. But and then you can track the story backwards and can see all the meaning of it. That to me, that's the greatest thing about it. But there's a lot to like about it.
Yeah, you achieve immortality and you're just bored, and you punish each other by aging you.
Yeah.
That's the punishment. Is artificial aging.
Yeah,
there's no plot synopsis that can really help with Zardoz. Sean Connery, a few years after he quit for good being James Bond, couldn't get work doing anything. And he didn't really understand the script to Zardoz at all, but he knew John Borman's films, and John had made Deliverance. He was hot off of Deliverance, in fact, when he made this. And Hollywood, they were in a unique spot that a couple films benefited from. This most of all, but Logan's Run a little bit, and a few other films that came after 2001, where Hollywood believed you could have a hit movie. And not only that, they believed you could have a hit science fiction movie that they didn't understand at all when they read it. So there was this window after 2001 where if you got in and you'd made a hit before and you just had some sort of clout, you could bring Zardoz to a bunch of studios at 20th Century Fox and say, here, we're going to do this. And they would look at it, and normally they would be horrified. And instead they would say, well, I don't know. This is what the kids like these days, right? This weird stuff. Well, I guess he made Deliverance. How bad could it be? And it isn't bad. Borman made a really good movie, but audiences at the time found it completely impenetrable. And it is, whether you love it or hate it, it's super weird. We all agree.
I like I said, guilty pleasure. It is weird.
It is super weird.
So Mazz, is this a film that you like watched growing up? Like you watched it a whole bunch?
I did.
Like that's what it became?
I watched it growing up, and every time I watched it, I thought, this will be the time it'll make more sense.
I watched it just a few days ago when I didn't know we were going to be talking about it today. I watched it last Tuesday in the afternoon. I have a Blu-ray of it, a little limited edition, only 3,000 copy Blu-ray that I bought because every movie that comes out that was on the sci-fi shelf at my local video store when I was a kid, I buy. Even if I don't like it, or even if it's old, whatever it is, I just want to recreate that shelf. So I have Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, and I have Your Hunter from the Future, and I have everything that was on that shelf. I don't skip any of them. And Zardoz included, which I always looked at and never saw. But when I brought that home as whatever I was, a 13-year-old, I mean, I was aghast at I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I had never been exposed to something that to me made absolutely no narrative sense whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
It makes a little sense. The older you get, it grows on you. Yeah. And I think it's important in a way that the seed be planted when you're young, because I think it's hard for anyone as an adult who's not just into cinema of the bizarre to come to it and like love it later. It's almost too silly for them. But as a kid, you're committed to taking what it is seriously all the way through to the end. Maybe that's not true of everybody here, but
it's very funny. It's a film with a lot of British actors in it.
Yes, but it was filmed in Ireland. Is it Scotland or Ireland? The jungle.
No, Ireland. Ireland. Yeah.
Ireland. Every Excalibur, Zardoz, a handful of his movies, they're all just shot basically in his
backyard.
Well,
his backyard, in this forest that he lives next to.
For someone to wear leather Speedos filming a film in Ireland, I mean, he must have been cold because that's all he had on.
Oh,
they were super cold.
The man is a professional actor. You got to give him that.
It has its spectacular moments. Dayna mentioned the sex scenes, which are truly psychedelic and bizarre.
Still,
you've got these
13. You thought, I can't wait to be older.
Yeah, you got these barbarians in masks, in diapers, on horseback, shooting people.
Yeah.
And they've been taught by their god to shoot people who they call, I can't remember what they call them.
Brutals.
Brutals, who are just people, like raising sheep and trying to live. And they're like this, Zardoz is this mechanism for population control in the future. And one of those guys, these killers, the cold-blooded killers, religious fanatic killer, meets up with this commune of immortal people who, as perfectly said, are so bored that they punish each other. And it's not just punish each other by aging and making themselves look ugly. That's certainly a big punish. But all they do is compete and punish each other. They've grown beyond like any sort of positive outlook on anything. They have a wit to them, but there's nothing meaningful there. And Connery's character, like the little tagline says, brings them the gift of death. Yeah. Brings them the gift of mortality, which they're clearly desperate for.
Does he have a name in that movie?
Zed.
Zed.
I
love it. I love that weird floating head guy. Yeah. I don't know what I still am not sure what his deal is, but he fascinates me every time he's on screen.
In the film, his name was Arthur Dent.
Arthur Frayne is his name.
Frayne, yeah.
I remembered the Frayne part, but not the Arthur part, so you got me there.
Yeah, Arthur Frayne / Zardoz.
/ voice of Zardoz.
Yeah.
Hang until the very end of the show, guys. We got a little clip of Zardoz for you if you got an extra minute.
Oh, exciting.
I mean, this of course just coming off of Deliverance. Zed was originally supposed to be played by Burt Reynolds.
Right. And Burt Reynolds wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Because he loved his experience on Deliverance, and he felt he was getting pigeonholed as a beefcake. At that point, he wanted to do something meaningful.
At that point, he wanted to be mostly naked.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But he got sick. He had to pull up because he was due to illness.
Yeah, his agent poisoned his beer, I guess.
Charlotte Rampling was actually quite excited to do this film. She believed that every
it's her kind of film.
Yeah, it was. She called it this. She said the script was poetry, and so she was like, "I'm on board."
High as a kite when she read that.
Yeah. I do love this. Borman was inspired to write Zardoz while preparing to adapt The Lord of the Rings for United Artists.
Yep, he was going to make a big multi-picture Lord of the Rings thing back in the 70s, and when that fell through,
yeah, they were like, that sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money. And he's like, all right, I'll give you Zardoz. Yeah.
Which probably didn't.
Wait with me. Yeah.
Which has a lot in common with The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
It does. It's just another movie he could make in his backyard where he wouldn't have to travel.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Which he loved to do. But there's a commentary on this Blu-ray that I have, and he's ridiculously hard on himself for it. But that movie's grown in esteem over the years slowly. I mean, how many years has it been? But it really has. People appreciate it for what it is now instead of for what it's not, which is, a traditional narrative. It just absolutely isn't in any way.
For a film that makes no sense, it's actually it's better put together than a lot of films that don't make any sense.
Yeah,
right. John Borman's Exorcist sequel is notoriously baffling and weird, but it's also a really, really, really well-made movie. He directed films with a lot of authority and knew what he was doing, and his instincts were always right. So Zardoz has a lot of meaning, even though it's on the surface, it's hard to understand what it's about exactly.
I love this tagline: beyond 1984, beyond 2001, beyond love, beyond death, beyond love, beyond death. And I'm like, that's actually pretty darn accurate right there.
It's all those things.
It's also beyond understanding and beyond
caring,
beyond wardrobe.
Beyond wardrobe. Yes.
And I'll give a little Zardoz warning, as if we haven't given enough. Zardoz, when you're watching it, about the first 40 minutes of it, it's about an hour and 40 minutes long. First 45 minutes of it, you're actually going, "Hey, this isn't so weird. I'm following this." Your moment will come. It will come where you just go, "What? What is happening?"
What? Yeah. You hit rewind a little bit. Okay, I missed a scene, and then you're like, no, I guess I didn't.
That's it. Yeah.
My mom tells this story, not at all about Zardoz, but I feel like Zardoz might suffer from the same problem. So my parents got married very young because they had me, and they really went on one date their entire 14-year marriage. And it was in 1974, and they went to see Barbra Streisand's What's Up, Doc. Mm-hmm. The one time they ever go out, and the kid who puts the reels on puts reel 2 on first. So they're watching this film thinking, this feels weird. Well, I don't know who these people are. I don't get the context. And nobody did anything about it. So they watched the film reel 2, then reel 1.
Wow.
And I feel like that's
and then they got caught up.
It was
It was the same theater. Well, it wasn't in Fargo, I guess, but it was, for us, we went and saw the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movie, GoldenEye. Yeah. First Bond movie in about 7 years, so there was a long wait for it. And they flipped what I would guess is reel 4 and reel 5.
Wow.
Or reel 3 and reel 4, something like that. So at first you roll with it. You're like, well, it's an espionage plot. We're not really following it, but it's all going to come together. It's when you hit the start of the next reel and when you realize what happened, where you're like, hey, to us.
Hey.
I
Why
don't
is
think
there
Sure
cri-
enough, there was an usher waiting by the door handing out free passes. To everyone. We laughed.
Why is there a credit sequence 35 minutes into the film?
Well, for Bond, that's not
Yeah.
unusual at all.
No, actually, yeah, that would actually track. So before we sign off, we don't want to leave Dayna fully hanging here. We've tortured her with.
No, Dana's got some awesome, and I can follow up a little bit.
Yeah,
some
so we're
awesome
we
streaming
won't.
ideas.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about Jane Austen films because, like we said, we're going to have you back when we do our Jane Austen list.
Yeah, not today.
List show.
You're committed to that. I'm committing
I'm
to it.
totally committed.
Yeah.
Oh, she's committed to that.
But
Yeah.
as you said, if there's a corset, I'm interested in.
I'm interested.
So
If it wasn't Corona time, I might even be wearing one.
yeah,
but-
sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some other period pieces, some other corseted.
And let's specifically talk about Elizabeth Gaskell because you've got a couple of those on your
I
list.
do.
Yeah.
I enjoy her very much. Although
Me
I've not
too.
read the Cranford novels, but
Cranford. I want it to be last. You don't like Cranford? Doug?
I was subjected to it only this year
so Mazz and I were in England,
with my mother.
and Mazz's mother is a true Irish woman. She only wants to watch or read books and movies that are so horrifically bleak and violent that I just want to kill myself at every turn. So we've watched just like all this stuff about the Easter uprising and all these terrible starving Irish families and famines. She loves the Holocaust. Tries to sell me on some film as a romance when it starts in the woods of maybe Czechoslovakia.
The Nazis are mowing
They
down
just
Jewish
slaughter.
dissidents. It's a love story.
But it's
Really?
a love story. Yeah.
I'm at my mother-in-law's house just weeping, and she's saying to me, I don't know what's the matter with you. It's a love story. Anyway, I convinced her that we've got to watch anything else. And she says to me, well, go upstairs. I have some movies you might want to watch. And there is Cranford, which just is like a manna coming from the sky after what we've watched.
Sure.
So we watched Cranford, Mazz's mother, who's almost 80, and Mazz and me. And at one point I looked over and Mazz was sitting like this, just trying to keep his eyes open.
She's those of you listening to the audio portion of our show, she's she's leaning forward and holding her eyelids open with her fingers.
Yeah. But the best thing is that when we came back from England, I said to Mazz, there's a sequel follow-up. And he said to me, gosh, what a shame.
Return to Cranford.
Return to Cranford. YouTube.
Yeah.
So we watched that too.
So you got to watch that too. That's just more of a good thing.
Saw that one.
I find the Cranford stories a bit twee, I'll admit, even for me, but there's any of us who like that sort of storytelling, and I love it all. Joel will tell you, I weasel them in here and there as we're talking. We haven't really done a show about it, but there's a warmth and comfort to those types of stories. It's like, and Elizabeth Gaskell, very much like Jane Austen, you can trust her that it's going to work out okay. It's not like reading even though it's hard times for a lot of people, and she gets, they go through stuff. It's not that. There's a lot of drama and a lot of tension, but you just, you're going to be okay at the end, and they're very, very comforting in that way. Whereas a Henry James novel might be just as good, have all the same stuff in it, but it pulls the rug out from under you half the time, and you don't even know which half it's going to be. So it's a coin flip. You might have a happy ending. You probably won't.
You probably won't.
Know till you get there, right?
Right. No, there's no bait and switch with these women.
No,
and I agree with you. I mean, it's funny. I've developed this new thing in middle age that's very perplexing to me that I'm really trying to figure out. But I have like physical responses now to things that are almost maybe too perfectly wrapped up. And I have this incredible thing. So we finished the second Cranford series, and I thought to myself, I can't breathe. And I went through this whole physical manifestation of realizing that I was done in that world. And it's a very bizarre, maybe super.
Oh, just that it wasn't going to come. You were done. That was the part.
You know, that I wasn't going to see, well, what happens with Miss Maddie next? Nothing. I mean, nothing happens in those movies. They're really tedious. But you're right. It's they're very comforting. They're very evocative of a time that just is like, I mean, will never come again. Even this pandemic global shutdown has not brought us all the way back to how many candles can we light in the house tonight? You know, so I mean, it's
I was going to say yet.
Yet there's still time.
Yeah.
So while Cranford is great and you can stream it, I'm pretty sure on Amazon. I think that's where that is, but I'm not 100% on that. But you look for it, Cranford and Return to Cranford. The great Dame Judi Dench is in it, with just a whole host of people from her generation, and it really is told. It's unique in that it is told from the perspective of the wise older people in the town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of the kids, and although there's plenty of kids that need to be married off in Cranford, you get the story not from the young lovers, but from the older people who've seen it all and their investment in it. So it's fun in that way because it's different. The other two stories, same author, both miniseries, both brilliant. 1999's Wives and Daughters.
Yeah.
With Justine Waddell, who we talked about. Justine Waddell was the British actress who wouldn't marry the guy who she met in the video store because he was renting Speed 2.
Well, that's fair enough. I mean,
that does tell you something right there.
Yeah, she doesn't really act anymore. She's fantastic in that series, and it's very romantic, but it's a little dry. But I think it pays off if you stick with it. And my favorite, maybe my favorite costume drama of all time, it would be in the discussion, is North and South.
North and South. Yep.
With
Patrick Swayze.
No, not the American version. This is Elizabeth.
Yeah,
Gaskell.
North and South. Don't be careful of that. The American miniseries North and South about the Civil War is pretty great, actually.
Also amazing.
Yeah, but that was
but we're talking about is North and South of England.
Yeah, this is all about the mills in.
It's about a southern country living preacher's daughter and their family who moved to. The town is fictional, but it's clearly supposed to be Manchester. It's all shot in Edinburgh, which I recognize. So I know a little bit. I'm a little bit of a, what do you call it, Anglophile? Is that it?
That is what you call it.
Is it?
Yeah.
that is
I can't be too much of one if I don't know the name for sure, but you know, I recognized Edinburgh that from the walk up the graveyard, up the bridge out of town, which is a very famous vista.
Well, they use
it's really neat. It's North and South is really neat. It's got, I want to say who played the head dwarf in the Hobbit movies. That's the guy we're talking about. He stars. He's a factory owner there.
Yeah, he is.
And the young woman Danielle something. Now you're going to listen to me click. Sorry about that.
I'm clicking too. Let's see. We have
Orlando Bloom. Oh, Dwarf. I was on Elf.
Yeah. Let's see. Richard Armitage.
Yeah. One of his first gigs out of college, and he's fantastic in it. It's a
really well done series.
It wasn't expected to be a hit or anything, and people, it's super beloved over there and fairly beloved over here. And I highly recommend that one. If you call yourself a Jane Austen fan, or you like any of those period dramas, and you haven't seen Wives and Daughters or Cranford or North and South, you're missing out. They're as good as anything out there.
You also just have to appreciate that Elizabeth Gaskell was kind of an early feminist in a very unusual way, because she was married and continued to write, which was super scandalous at the time.
Yep.
And she broke a lot of ground just as a independent married woman, which was not a phrase that anybody would ever have thought about at the time.
Right. And that sense of propriety that runs through all these types of stories, and the little principled ways in which characters free themselves of it occasionally. Mm-hmm. all the good ones who write in that form all take the rules of society very seriously, whilst
kind of bending them on their ear,
whilst poking holes in them a little bit.
Yep.
You know what I mean? All these stories do that. I think every single one of them, that's a common theme throughout. So, and I just tremendously moved by North and South. Every time I see it, I'm like, I just keep telling myself when I'm watching it, it's going to work out for you two kids. I'm sure of it.
See, you have that I can't breathe thing too.
It happens.
It does.
And I know how it ends, and it still happens. That's how you know it's good.
Yep.
Well, that's terrific. This has been absolutely wonderful, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us on.
Before we let them go, I know we don't want to keep you too long, but do tell us quickly about your show. We should have done that at the beginning.
Yeah, well, we talked a little bit about
podcast.
Well, just
so
please tell us quickly about we know you because we all go way back together. But what is it that you guys are doing? Just briefly, trying to accomplish with your show. What's it called? Where can they find it? That sort of thing, so that we can get your pitch in.
So you can find it at Extraordinary on the website, or it's on. You can stream it on a bunch of places as a podcast.
But it's called Extraordinary.
Yes.
Dayna is spelled Dayna.
Yes.
Delval, Delval, if you want to.
Right.
And her address is
Social Security card.
And her phone number, the last.
So the piece that you two referenced was a 9-week series that Mazz and I did together about Mazz's journey into alcoholism and our shared journey into sobriety. So that was a February, March, and early April 9-week series, and you guys were so kind to call it out.
Well, I can just say, if you're out there dealing with any of those issues, if you've dealt with them in the past, or if they're foreign to you and you'd like to learn more about the experience, I cannot recommend that series enough. It's just incredibly brave and honest thing. It's nothing like what we do. We share some personal anecdotes with you, but it's nothing like what we do here. That doesn't make our show bad per se, but when people put themselves out there, you just want to, and you're our friends, but we just want to support them so badly. It's strange. It's a tough story to listen to. I don't mean to steal your thunder, but I know you won't talk about it in these terms. So
I won't.
It's a strange story to listen to, but it just makes you care so much. So like any great piece of fiction, like we've been talking about here, it'll fire up the empathetic tools that you have in a very real way. So I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, and
I'm impressed with you guys for doing that. Yeah,
and I hope that people who have either watched or listened to this show today, you have gotten a little taste of how, it's a tough listen, and it's really honest. But Mazz and Dayna are two actually really clever, witty, fun people, and so they tell it in a way that I'm not saying it's not a slog. It isn't going to start off, these were the
Not
best of times. These were the blurst of times. It's, it's not that. These are, you two do an extraordinary job of approaching it, of approaching the story that you're telling, this true story of, with a lot of heart and a lot of wit and still a sense of
storytelling.
Storytelling of play of this is serious, but it's not, and then
it's not a dour.
You're not going to be like reaching for the razor blades or anything after while listening.
No, I certainly hope not.
And then and you're going to go and as you're listening, you're going to go, I think it's going to be okay, you kids. I think you're going to get together at the end.
Yeah, especially if you've heard this first, you see how it ends.
So so check them out at extraordinary.com. Dayna has a whole bunch of other posts on there, obviously, as well. And if
you haven't heard us talk about Dayna, she's a big arts booster in her community and in the world in general. And you get a lot of that too, which is great.
She's kind of a big deal, at least to the two of us. And and then of course you can you can reach out to us, to Ryan and I, at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram, and of course the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on the Facebook. And of course now you can see our faces as we speak at you, and in this case yell, like right at you. I'm yelling. On YouTube, the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on YouTube, where you will not only see the show, but see some of the collections of other lists that we have done. In fact, today, Ryan, I forgot to share this with you. I had a friend, our friend Trish, who has been a longtime listener of the show. She wrote me going, I'm watching. What was she watching? I was watching The Princess Bride with my daughter, and it made me think you guys should do a show about like best sword fighting duels. And I said, well, oddly enough, click, and I just shared the podcast.
Shared the podcast of our top 10 sword fighting duels.
Our
dueling lists of top 5.
Yeah, she stopped what she was doing. She listened to our show, and she took the time to write me back and say, well done, you guys. That was pretty spectacular. I can't believe I haven't seen Rob Roy.
That episode was Joel's idea. That's one of my favorite episodes.
Excellent. That's an excellent idea. Does Errol Flynn make many?
Well, no, because we did a cutoff. We talked about Errol Flynn.
We did. He came up.
But we did it. We did a cutoff, so we were talking about more modern.
Modern most films. Of what we talk about on the show is kind of from the early 70s or late 60s.
Kind of our lifetimes. Yeah. So
did Highlander make it in there to the top 5?
I don't know, Mazz. You just have to check it out, won't you?
Damn, I thought I was going to go, yes. I thought I was going to sneak in there for the answer.
We'll watch and listen. And
just because we know you and have been properly introduced does not mean we will tell you our lists without you're listening to the show.
But on the YouTube page, you can check out, we have a compilation of those
fights are actually on the
particular
YouTube
scenes. That's a list. And of course, our electronic movie score episode, which is one of my personal favorites.
That's a good one.
So those are also available on YouTube.
If you've got a topic you want to talk about and you want to be our guest, you can see now we've had our first guest. It's not scary. Please write us and let us know. Tell us what you want to talk about, and we'll get you set up. We'd love to have you. And where should they do that, Joel? Have you already told them?
I did, but of course you can reach out to us. AskJoelAndRyan@gmail.com. That's the one I didn't say. AskJoelAndRyan@gmail.com. The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram, and YouTube page, Movie Show with Joel and Ryan.
Cool. So thanks for coming, Dayna. Dr. Mary, we appreciate it.
Thanks for having
Dayna.
us. Super fun.
So great to see you guys. And what's really been fun is I've seen the sun go down in Fargo throughout the course of this episode.
Here. It's like, I'm going to light 2 candles tonight just in honor of Cranford.
There you go. One for Cranford and one for return of Cranford.
Yeah, one for the return of Cranford. And then and a third, which is a prayer candle that hopes of Cranford, the next generation.
The reckoning.
The reckoning.
All right. See you, everybody.
Too fast, too Cranfordy. All right. That'll do it for us. Have a wonderful week. Thank you guys so much, and have a great.
Bye.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.
Zardoz speaks to you, his chosen ones. You have been raised up from brutality to kill the brutals who multiply, and are legion. To this end, Zardoz, your god, gave you the gift of the gun. The gun is good.
The gun is good!
The penis is evil. The penis shoots seeds and makes new life to poison the earth with a plague of men, as once it was. But the gun shoots death and purifies the earth of the filth of brutals. Go forth and kill. Zardoz has spoken.